Claire Bell, a 3-year-old girl vanishes. 4 days later, she's found alone, filthy, silent, by the side of a highway. No shoes. No explanation. No adult in sight. Her mother was spotted wandering, barefoot, disoriented, later charged with abandoning her child. Before that, she Googled toddler urns, posted cryptic videos, said things no mother should ever say. Now ask yourself, is this just one broken woman? Or are we missing something much bigger? Because just weeks earlier, 3 little girls are murdered by their father in the woods. Before that, 2 siblings vanished from their home without a sound. No cameras. No witnesses. No suspects. What if it's not a coincidence? What if these aren't isolated tragedies? What if there's a pattern, a rising trend, of children disappearing from inside their own homes, at the hands of the very people meant to protect them? How many more will there be before we call it what it is? The case of Claire Bell. Claire Bell didn't grow up in a big family. She had no siblings, no stepfather, no steady male figure in the house. At the center of her small, quiet world was one person, her mother, Rachel Todd. But Rachel wasn't just Claire's mom. She was her only caretaker, her only guardian, her only line of defense. And for anyone watching closely, the signs of strain had been there for a while. Rachel and Claire's father, Matt Bell, were not together. They hadn't been for some time. While Matt reportedly had visitation rights, he didn't have custody. And sources close to the family say Rachel made it hard for him to stay involved. She rarely allowed visits. She kept communication minimal. In fact, many believe Rachel intentionally isolated Claire from Matt's entire side of the family, including her paternal grandparents. Claire's grandmother on the Bell side later revealed that they learned about Claire's disappearance through the news. Rachel didn't call them. Police didn't notify them. They simply watched it unfold on TV, like everyone else. For months, maybe longer, they hadn't been allowed to see Claire. They had been cut off. And in the days following the disappearance, that silence turned into anger. Grief turned into suspicion. On Rachel's side, things weren't much clearer. There's no public record of support from her own family, no relatives appearing in court, no mother or father speaking on her behalf, no one claiming Rachel needed help or defending her mental state. If they existed, they stayed invisible. Rachel lived alone with Claire. She raised her daughter alone, and in that isolation, she began to break down. In her posts and messages, Rachel hinted at the pressure she felt. She often mentioned being exhausted, overwhelmed, and unsupported. "I'm doing this all by myself," she wrote. "It's too much." There were no signs of a boyfriend, no mentions of a support system. She was carrying everything, and that weight was starting to crush her. Then there was Hazel. A small, brown, long-haired Chihuahua. Claire's beloved companion. Hazel went everywhere with them. Rachel called her, "my second baby." Their bond was deep and emotional. Hazel wasn't just a pet, she was family. The case happened Saturday in Coteau-du-Lac, Quebec. Sometime before 3 p.m. on June 15, 2025, Rachel Todd drove her car, with her 3-year-old daughter Claire Bell, allegedly in tow, toward a roadside fireworks shop called Big Boom Fireworks. The store sat just off Autoroute 20, an exposed lot with no real surveillance. No homes nearby, and few passersby. What Rachel and Claire were doing there remains unclear. What is clear is that no one saw Claire that morning. No one could confirm she had even been in the car. At around 3 p.m., Rachel entered the store barefoot, visibly shaken. Witnesses described her as distressed, crying, and repeating the words, "Where's my daughter?" She didn't have her phone on her. Whether she left it in the car or had lost it earlier, we don't know. She asked the store clerk to call the police, claiming Claire had vanished from the vehicle. But there was no struggle, no scream, no sign of forced entry or panic, just a mother and a missing child. Police arrived shortly after. They found Rachel's car near the store, but inside, nothing. No backpack, no toys, no food or water, no small shoes or discarded clothing, no trace that Claire had been in that car at all. The ground around the vehicle revealed nothing, no footprints, no trails, no clues. There were no working security cameras on site, and none from nearby stores that showed Claire walking, running, or being taken. Not one single person that day had seen Claire Bell. Even more disturbing, Rachel couldn't pinpoint the last time she had seen her daughter. Her initial description of Claire's outfit was vague, only solidified after repeated questioning: a white t-shirt with a pink heart, blue shorts, and no shoes. Claire's dog Hazel, a loyal brown chihuahua that followed her everywhere, was also missing at the same time. Police began investigating immediately, but held back details from the public for the first 24 hours. They didn't activate an Amber Alert. Why? Because, under Canadian law, an Amber Alert requires evidence of abduction, an identified suspect or credible threat. This case had none of that. And yet, the authorities labeled Claire's disappearance suspicious from day one. Rachel's timeline was patchy. She couldn't account for every stop she made that day. Police believe there may have been multiple, unconfirmed locations between her home and the fireworks store, but they found no GPS data, no traffic camera hits, and no witnesses. The hours leading up to 3:00 p.m. became a black hole. No one could say where Claire was, or if she had been with Rachel at all. On June 16, the investigation took a major turn. With no trace of Claire found in Coteau-du-Lac, Quebec police officially expanded the search beyond provincial lines. The SNRIDE du Québec began working in coordination with Ontario police and federal agencies. Drones, helicopters, sonar teams, ground searchers, and K9 units were deployed across multiple terrains, from open fields to the St. Lawrence River. Despite the full-scale mobilization, both June 16 and 17 passed without any breakthroughs. No clothing, no footprints, no surveillance footage. Not even a single confirmed sighting. Every lead turned cold. The decision not to issue an Amber Alert continued to fuel public outrage, especially given the sheer scale of the operation and the complete absence of evidence. Rachel Todd remained the sole person with direct knowledge of Claire's last known movements. But she couldn't recall the precise route she took that day, nor could she confirm exactly when she last saw Claire in the car. Despite her confused state, police did not subject her to a psychological evaluation. She stayed at liberty, shaken, but unmonitored. This was when investigators began to seriously question whether Claire had ever been at the Big Boom fireworks store at all. No witnesses, no footage, no digital trace. Every attempt to retrace Rachel's path using traffic cams or phone GPS led nowhere. As a result, search efforts quietly but significantly shifted west toward Ontario. The public wasn't told why. A key development came on June 17. A scent-tracking K9 team reportedly picked up a faint trail leading away from the original site, heading west, but not conclusively. Still, it was enough to justify expanding the search zone, eventually leading to an area more than 150 kilometers away. Claire's dog, Hazel, was still missing. While small in size, Hazel was believed to be deeply bonded with Claire, and search teams were briefed to look for both. Oddly, police made no public mention of Hazel's disappearance at this point, and the media hardly noticed. Meanwhile, Rachel's own behavior raised even more questions. Behind the scenes, investigators worked around the clock. They questioned family members, including Matt Bell, Claire's father, reviewed Rachel's digital footprint, and examined her financial transactions. Nothing cracked the case. Other red flags went mostly unnoticed. Claire had gone missing without shoes, without a jacket, without her usual plush toys or snacks. No one, not neighbors, not friends, had seen or spoken to Claire for days before June 15. Not one external confirmation existed that the child was even alive that week. Even canine units failed to pick up her scent at the scene, only possibly Rachel's. As June 17 closed, the atmosphere had shifted. Public trust began to fray. Teams were growing frustrated, and the deeper law enforcement looked, the more they began to fear this was of a simple case of a child wandering off. Around 2:06 p.m. on June 18, 2025, officers with the Ontario Provincial Police made a stunning discovery. A drone deployed over Highway 40 near exit 66 in St. Albert, Ontario spotted a small child walking alone along the roadside. The location was more than 150 kilometers west of Montreal and over 50 kilometers past the Quebec-Ontario border. The child was identified as Claire Bell, the 3-year-old who had been missing since June 15. Claire was found wearing the exact outfit her mother had vaguely described days earlier, a white t-shirt with a pink heart and a pair of shorts. She was barefoot. No jacket. No water, no food, no belongings. More importantly, no one was with her. Not a single adult or vehicle in sight. When officers reached her, Claire was responsive but clearly worn down. She was dehydrated, hungry, and physically exhausted. But she was conscious and able to speak. Emergency responders immediately provided water, light food, and checked her vitals. She was then rushed to a local hospital in Ontario for a full medical evaluation. Remarkably, Claire showed no signs of physical abuse or serious injury. There were no bruises, no signs of restraint, and no indication she had been violently assaulted. However, her mental and emotional state raised serious concerns. Officers described her demeanor as calm but disoriented, a response often seen in young children experiencing trauma or prolonged fear. A few hundred meters away, searchers made another heartbreaking discovery. Hazel, Claire's small dog, had been with her all along. The dog was found dead, likely from dehydration or exhaustion. There was no sign of trauma, just collapse. Hazel's presence near Claire offered critical confirmation they had traveled together during those missing days, and Hazel had remained with Claire until the end. That evening, the OPP held a press conference. The mood was a mix of relief and unease. Yes, Claire was alive, but how she ended up so far from home alone, with no clear path or explanation, remained a mystery. Investigators from both Ontario and Quebec joined forces to piece together what had happened between June 15th and June 18th. Back in Quebec, police quickly turned their attention to Rachel Todd, Claire's mother. Within hours of Claire's discovery, Rachel was taken in for further questioning. She was also placed under psychiatric evaluation due to prior erratic behavior and emotional instability. Rachel had been the only person who claimed to know where Claire was last seen, but her statements had been inconsistent and vague. Investigators now had an urgent task to retrace the possible route from Coteau-du-Lac, Quebec, where Claire was first reported missing, all the way to St. Albert, Ontario. They began reviewing GPS data, traffic cameras, phone signals, and public surveillance footage, searching for any clue that might show how Claire got there. The road was long, the weather had been harsh, and the terrain was wooded and treacherous. For a barefoot toddler, walking that distance unaided was all but impossible. Importantly, police found no adult items, no discarded belongings, and no vehicle tracks at the scene. There was also no indication that Claire had been dropped off recently. No eyewitnesses, no cameras, and no signs of a struggle or interaction. Claire had simply appeared, and the timing suggested she hadn't been there long before being found. The discovery of Hazel's body added weight to the theory that Claire had not been entirely alone. If Hazel had survived the trip with her, it suggested movement, not stasis. Claire may have been walking for days, or possibly relocated and left behind only hours before she was found. Either way, it challenged the theory that she had simply wandered off and remained hidden near Coteau-du-Lac. More troubling details emerged. Claire reportedly never mentioned her mother after being found. She didn't ask for Rachel, didn't cry out, didn't seem to anticipate a reunion. Law enforcement and hospital staff noted this emotional disconnect, highly unusual for a child who had been separated from her primary caregiver. Claire remained quiet, almost unnaturally calm, not showing the fear or relief one might expect. Meanwhile, Rachel remained silent. She did not speak to the media, did not issue a statement, and was not seen at the hospital. Authorities confirmed she was being held and assessed, but offered no timeline for potential charges. What was once a search and rescue effort had clearly shifted into a criminal investigation. Within 24 hours of the discovery, police began their investigation on several key questions. Did someone transport Claire to Ontario? Was she intentionally abandoned in a remote area? Was Rachel directly involved, or had someone else helped her carry out the act? Or worse, were there signs of long-term neglect that had finally escalated into crisis? No answers were immediately available. The site where Claire was found yielded almost no physical evidence. The drone's appearance in the area was never fully explained. Some speculated it was luck, others believed police had quiet digital leads they chose not to share. Either way, Claire was saved. Hazel wasn't. and the truth remained elusive. In the days that followed, Claire's condition slowly improved. She remained under medical observation, with psychological support recommended long-term. Rachel remained in custody. Investigators expanded their work into both provinces, now treating the case not as a disappearance, but as a potential crime involving abandonment, endangerment, or worse. What happened to Claire Bell between June 15th and June 18th is still under investigation. But what's certain is this: she survived something she should never have had to endure. And someone, somewhere, knows why. For the suspect in this case, ironically, the prime one isn't a stranger in the dark. It's her own mother, Rachel Todd. Before Claire the race appeared, Rachel Todd displayed a series of behaviors that, in retrospect, appear deeply troubling. On her social account, which named Cosmic Flow, she posted dark, ominous messages such as, "Have you ever met a mother with nothing left to lose?" And, "No longer a child of this earth. She's a light body now." These weren't cryptic lyrics or abstract metaphors. They were emotional outbursts that hinted at rage and despair, possibly directed at Claire's father or his family. The language was raw and unfiltered, the voice of someone unraveling under emotional weight. As of June 15, 2025, the day Claire was reported missing, she had uploaded 243 videos, most of which revolved around astrology, divine feminine energy, spiritual transformation, and cosmic grief. Many of these videos were recorded in dimly lit rooms, with purple and green filters, and often used whispered narration. The atmosphere was trance-like, surreal, almost otherworldly. It didn't feel like performance art. It felt like dissociation caught on camera. In several videos, Rachel alternated between crying, whispering, and smiling in ways that struck many viewers as emotionally unstable. In one especially disturbing video, she held Claire in her arms and sobbed, saying softly, That moment, recorded and posted just hours before Claire was reported missing, now reads like a tragic omen. Rachel also regularly complained about being a single mother with no support. She described feeling exhausted, overwhelmed, and emotionally drained. Her posts conveyed a consistent sense of hopelessness, like someone who was barely holding on. Along with these posts came her decision to cut off the paternal side of Claire's family entirely. The Bells, including Claire's grandmother, claimed they were blocked on all platforms, denied visitation, and never informed about Claire's status. This social isolation likely deepened Rachel's emotional fragility. On June 15, arrived at Big Boom Fireworks in a disoriented state. She was barefoot, crying, and repeatedly asked employees, "Where is my daughter?" She didn't bring a phone and relied on the staff to call the police. Even more suspicious was her inability to explain when she last saw Claire. She couldn't recall whether Claire had exited the car or stayed inside. The time gap between when Claire was supposedly lost and when police were contacted ranged from 30 minutes to an hour. When asked what Claire was wearing, Rachel's answers were vague. Only after several questions did she recall a white shirt with a heart. Police later issued a corrected description to the public. More alarmingly, no belongings of Claire were found. No toys, backpack, water bottle, or shoes. That's highly unusual for a 3-year-old. No witnesses saw Claire that day. There were no surveillance videos, no nearby pedestrians, no evidence the child had been at the fireworks store. Rachel was the only person who claimed Claire was with her. On June 16 and 17, as the investigation ramped up, Rachel's inconsistencies deepened. Her version of events kept shifting. She couldn't provide a consistent route or timeline. Police also couldn't retrieve reliable GPS data from her phone. Technologically, her movements were almost invisible, raising the possibility that Claire had never left the house that day. Rachel made no public plea for help. She didn't appear in front of the media or issue statements begging for Claire's return. Her silence was haunting. This wasn't the behavior of a panicked mother desperate to find her missing child. On June 18, Claire was miraculously found alive. But again, Rachel made no public statement. She was taken into custody and underwent psychiatric evaluation. Authorities deemed her emotionally unstable. She wasn't allowed to visit Claire in the hospital. Meanwhile, Claire did not ask for her mother. She didn't cry for her. She didn't even mention her. For a toddler, that's profoundly unusual and may suggest emotional distancing or trauma. One of the most disturbing details emerged during the forensic investigation. Rachel had searched toddler urns prior to Claire's disappearance. That kind of search isn't accidental. It hints at psychological preparation for the child's death, combined with earlier social media posts about letting go and the burden of motherhood. The narrative becomes deeply concerning. There were no calls or messages from Rachel to friends or family in the hours after Claire vanished. She didn't notify anyone. The first people to learn about Claire's disappearance were employees at the fireworks store. That lack of outreach further implies that Rachel may not have been surprised by Claire's absence. Family members confirmed past arguments over custody. Rachel had reportedly told the Bell family, "They want to take her from me." After these conflicts, she isolated Claire completely. The emotional pressure may have built into something catastrophic. Rachel disappeared from social media after June 15. Her accounts were wiped or deactivated. She posted no calls for help, no photos of Claire, no responses to public concern. This vanishing act was not only suspicious, it was unprecedented for a mother in such a scenario. Behaviorally, Rachel may have suffered from untreated mental health issues. Her memory lapses, dramatic language, lack of emotion, and paranoia all suggest possible PTSD, depression, or dissociation. The tone of her TikTok account, complete with whispering, surreal lighting, spiritual overtones, and contradictory emotional states, served not as harmless content creation, but as a digital diary of dissent. And finally, Claire herself shines of emotional detachment. She was described as quiet, non-reactive, and not seeking her mother. That kind of calm in a child, after being abandoned for days, may indicate prior neglect or a survival response. Compounding the concern, Claire reportedly didn't call for her mother, didn't cry for her, didn't even mention her name. The strange behavior of Rachel is undeniable, but what makes things even more unsettling are the bizarre details surrounding when and where Claire was found. Together, they don't just raise questions, they point directly to Rachel as the prime suspect. Firstly, let's take a closer look at Claire and her mysterious survival. When Claire Bell was finally found, the entire country breathed a sigh of relief. But that relief quickly turned into confusion. Because the place she was found, off a highway exit in St. Albert, Ontario, was over 150 kilometers away from where she was last seen. That's not a small detour. That's a whole different province. She was barefoot. She had no food, no water, no jacket. Yet somehow she was alive. That alone felt like a miracle. But then came the hard part, trying to figure out how a 3-year-old child could have made it that far, alone, over 3 full days. The honest answer, she couldn't have. Not on her own. Then there was Hazel, her dog, lying dead nearby. Police said Hazel likely died from exhaustion or dehydration. If Hazel didn't make it, how did Claire survive? If they were together that whole time, how did one fall while the other didn't? That question has no easy answer. And let's not forget, nobody saw Claire on the road. No drivers called her in. No security cameras spotted her walking. No neighbors or locals said a word about seeing a child alone. That's 3 days without a single sighting. If she'd been wandering around in public, someone would have noticed. It gets weirder. The spot she was found wasn't just random. It wasn't near homes or stores. It was isolated. There were no cars nearby, no signs of a campsite, no garbage or blankets. Nothing to suggest anyone had been staying there. So how did the drone just happen to fly over that spot? That's what people keep asking. It didn't seem like part of the original search zone. Was there a tip? A phone ping? Something they're not telling the public. Because the drone flew directly over her and found her fast. That feels too precise to be luck. When officers approached her, Claire didn't cry. She didn't scream. She didn't even ask for her mom. She was quiet, calm, dazed. Police described her as alert but disoriented. That's not what most 3-year-olds do after being lost for 3 days. That's what kids do when they've been through something they can't process. And here's the kicker. No one knows where she was during that time. No clues. No food wrappers. No water bottles. No place that looked like she'd been sleeping. No path leading to the road. Just a little girl, standing alone, like she'd just appeared there out of nowhere. So now, the real questions begin. Did someone have her and then drop her off? Did she spend 3 days in hiding? Or was she moved around and abandoned at the last minute? At the time this video is being made, no new official charges or updates have been released. So all we have right now are theories. But every one of those theories points squarely in the direction of Rachel Todd. The first theory, that Claire walked the entire journey from Coteau-du-Lac to St. Albert, Ontario, is arguably the least plausible. We're talking about a 3-year-old child, barefoot, in poor weather conditions, supposedly traversing over 150 kilometers of terrain without access to food, water, shelter, or any adult supervision. Not a single witness, camera, or bystander reported seeing her during that time. There were no footprints, no signs of temporary shelter, and no indicators of survival behavior, such as scavenging for food or seeking help. The road conditions, exposure to elements, and wildlife dangers make this an almost physically impossible feat for a toddler. And yet, the theory persists as a default explanation only because Claire was found alone, and no other suspect or clear mechanism has been publicly confirmed. The discovery of Hazel, Claire's small dog, near the same area adds another layer to the skepticism around this theory. Hazel was found dead just a few hundred meters from where Claire was located. There were no signs of trauma or violence on the dog's body. The most likely cause of death was exhaustion, starvation, or dehydration. Hazel's presence near Claire suggests they had been together during the disappearance. That a small dog could follow a 3-year-old across, follow a 50 kilometers undetected, and die from exposure shortly before discovery, undermines the idea that this was an extended journey. If Hazel and Claire had truly traveled such a distance, there would almost certainly be evidence along the way, sightings, camera footage, disturbances in terrain. But there was nothing. In contrast, the second theory, that Claire had been abandoned earlier, closer to where she was ultimately found, gains credibility when we consider the logistical impossibility of the walk. Claire was located just off Highway 417, without any marks on her feet consistent with days of walking through rough terrain. This suggests she may have been left there recently, possibly within a few hours of discovery. Her proximity to the road implies she wasn't hidden deeply in the woods, and there were no signs of long-term shelter. This theory accounts for the absence of public sightings and the lack of physical evidence supporting a prolonged journey. It would also explain her condition, dehydrated and disoriented, but not severely injured or exposed. If someone left her there intentionally, it may have been timed to ensure she was found before her health deteriorated further. Her behavior upon being found also raises questions. According to police, Claire did not cry or scream. She didn't call for her mother, didn't display fear, and answered questions calmly, but in a disoriented state. That reaction is deeply unusual for a 3-year-old child who had just experienced abandonment, isolation, or even a long walk through dangerous terrain. It suggests emotional detachment or trauma. Perhaps not from this single incident, but from a pattern of neglect or stress prior to the disappearance. Her calm but vacant demeanor supports the notion that she may have been accustomed to being alone or emotionally unsupported. It also casts doubt on the idea of a spontaneous disappearance. A third theory posits that Claire was never at the reported location of disappearance, the fireworks store. Rachel Todd, the mother, was the sole person claiming Claire had been present. There were no witnesses, no security footage, and no physical traces like dropped toys or shoe prints to confirm Claire's presence there. If Claire was never at that location, the entire narrative around her disappearance could be a fabrication. constructed to shift attention away from another scene, perhaps Rachel's home or another private location. This theory is reinforced by the fact that Rachel appeared disoriented and inconsistent in her statements. Additionally, authorities were unable to extract any GPS or cell data proving Claire's whereabouts prior to being found. If Claire had never left the house, or if she had been somewhere else entirely, this would explain why all searches near the fireworks store yielded nothing. The fourth and perhaps most chilling theory suggests premeditation, that Rachel Todd orchestrated the entire disappearance. Several facts make this plausible. Prior to the event, Rachel had posted disturbing videos with cryptic language about motherhood and loss, and even searched for toddler urns. She had isolated herself and Claire from the father's family and had a documented history of emotional instability. There was also an extended delay between the moment Claire allegedly went missing and when Rachel alerted anyone. Coupled with inconsistencies in her description of events and lack of effort to mobilize public support, this pattern points to possible intent. Her silence after Claire was found, no public thank you, no hospital visit, no visible relief, only fueled public suspicion. If Rachel had planned to remove Claire from her life, only to change her mind or fail to execute the plan fully, this could explain the bizarre timeline and the inexplicable reappearance of Claire in a location far from the original scene. Another piece of this theory lies in the fact that Rachel was not permitted to visit Claire in the hospital after she was found. In most missing child cases, once the child is found, parents are typically brought in immediately for reunification, comfort, and assessment. That did not happen here. The police's decision to detain Rachel and subject her to immediate psychological evaluation suggests that they had already suspected foul play involving the mother. It's a significant procedural action that rarely occurs unless investigators have substantial cause. Additionally, there's the mystery surrounding how the Ontario Provincial Police located Claire using a drone in such a remote and unexpected area. The drone was deployed to St. Albert, over 150 kilometers from where Claire was last reported, and yet found her in a precise location. Police have not explained what led them there. Was there GPS data from Rachel's phone? An unreported tip, behavioral pattern analysis. Without clarity, the decision to search there appears strategic, not random. This adds weight to theories involving prior planning or digital footprints pointing to that location. Lastly, the fifth theory offers a more ambiguous but possible scenario, that a third party was involved, someone who either took Claire or helped her along the way, and later released her. This theory accommodates gaps in the story that no other explanation fully resolves: how Claire could have survived so long without support, how she ended up so far from home, and why no trace of her journey exists. If someone did take her, they may have cared for her temporarily and later abandoned her in a public location where she'd be found. This could explain her relatively stable physical condition and lack of trauma. However, the absence of vehicle tracks, DNA, surveillance footage, or witnesses makes it hard to support this scenario without more evidence. If someone helped Claire, why haven't they come forward? If she was taken and released, what was their motive? Each theory reveals more questions than answers. The self-walking hypothesis fails against basic logistics and human limits. The abandonment theory makes more sense but lacks direct proof. Never at the fireworks store. Theory shifts suspicion directly onto Rachel and opens the door to deeper deception. The premeditation theory is disturbing, but it connects dots from behavior, digital footprints, and Rachel's emotional profile. The third-party theory is plausible, yet oddly unsupported by external data. What's most telling is not which theory is definitely correct, but how each one reflects different layers of uncertainty in the case. They each highlight what is missing: evidence, transparency, accountability. Until more data is released, from forensic analysis, psychological evaluations, or Claire's own future testimony, we remain in the realm of speculation. Still, these theories don't stand equally. Some collapse under their own weight, while others linger in the background, quietly shaping public suspicion. Obviously, all the theories surrounding Claire Bell's disappearance share one unmistakable common thread: Rachel Todd. Her behavior before, during, and after Claire's disappearance is woven into every possible explanation. The emotional instability, the digital footprint, the public silence, none of it can be ignored. Even in the absence of formal charges beyond child endangerment, the gravitational pull of Rachel's presence in every theory makes one thing clear: she's not just part of the story. She may be the story. When parents become the threat. Just days before the Claire Bell case stunned Canada, another deeply disturbing tragedy had already shaken the United States. This time, it wasn't a missing child. It was the brutal end of 3 young lives. In the forests of Washington state, authorities uncovered a crime so heartbreaking, so personal, it defied comprehension. The victims were 3 sisters, Peyton, Evelyn, and Olivia Decker, all under the age of 10. And the person accused of taking their lives was their own father, Travis Decker. This tragedy happened on May 30, 2025. Travis Decker, a 32-year-old former U.S. Army sergeant, picked up his daughters Peyton aged 9, Evelyn aged 8, and Olivia aged 5, for a scheduled court-ordered visitation. This routine custody exchange quickly turned into a nightmare. Decker never returned the girls to their mother, Whitney Decker, and ceased all communication. That evening, concern escalated rapidly. When calls went unanswered and the children did not return, Whitney contacted authorities. However, an Amber Alert wasn't immediately issued. Police instead activated an Endangered Missing Person Alert. The next day, citing insufficient evidence of imminent danger. The horrific truth on June 2, 2025, when authorities discovered the lifeless bodies of the 3 girls near Rock Island Campground in the Okanogan-Wenatchee National Forest. The location, remote and quiet, was situated near a stream where the girls were found suffocated, their small wrists zip-tied, and their heads covered with plastic bags. It was a scene of calculated cruelty. Police quickly confirmed the cause of death as homicide by suffocation. Evidence nearby, including blood smears and a recently discharged bullet, indicated that Decker had prepared the site and possibly carried a weapon. The suspect, Travis Decker, had a background that offered troubling context. A veteran of the U.S. Army, he had served in Afghanistan and was later affiliated with the Washington National Guard. But his post-military life unraveled. Diagnosed with borderline personality disorder and complex PTSD, Decker reportedly refused court-ordered psychological treatment and anger management. By late 2024, he had become homeless, living out of a white GMC truck or squatting in campgrounds and budget hotels. Despite these red flags, the court allowed him supervised visitation rights. Before the murders, Decker had searched online for how to relocate to Canada, signaling a possible premeditated escape plan. This detail, combined with his wilderness survival training and erratic behavior, pointed toward an intentional act rather than a spontaneous breakdown. His skills made him a formidable fugitive, capable of surviving in rugged terrain without support. The response from law enforcement was massive. Agencies including the FBI, ICE, U.S. Marshals, and local sheriff's departments joined forces in a multi-county manhunt. Drones, helicopters, canine units, and foot patrols scoured the mountainous Wenatchee region. Authorities discovered signs suggesting Decker had camped in the wild for weeks, and a possible sighting near Blewett Pass on June 10 further fueled the search. By June 20, Decker remained at large, and a $20,000 reward was issued for information leading to his capture. In the wake of the murders, public outrage swelled. Whitney Decker, devastated and furious, criticized law enforcement's delay in activating the Amber Alert system. Through her attorney, she called for reform in child protection laws and improved mental health services for veterans. She noted that although she had concerns about Decker's psychological state and unstable lifestyle, she never imagined he would harm his daughters. Travis Decker's own family echoed these sentiments. His brother, Thomas Decker, described Travis as once loving but progressively volatile. The family had staged an intervention months earlier, alarmed by his erratic spending and emotional instability, but were met with resistance. Thomas publicly pleaded with his brother to surrender, calling his actions evil and unforgivable. Community reaction was equally visceral. Schools held memorials for the three girls. Locals organized vigils and demanded accountability. Rock Island Campground was temporarily closed, and residents in surrounding counties were urged to stay vigilant. The case reignited national conversations about the gaps in the child welfare and judicial systems. Several systemic issues emerged. First, the limitations of the Amber Alert system became glaringly apparent. The criteria for issuing an alert failed to accommodate situations involving unstable parents with supervised visitation. Second, the oversight in allowing Decker, with a documented mental health history and homelessness, to retain unsupervised access to his children highlighted failings in family court protocols. Lastly, the case underscored the urgent need for accessible and enforced mental health care for veterans re-entering civilian life. As of June 20, 2025, Travis Decker remained a fugitive. Authorities continued to circulate updated renderings of his possible appearance changes: clean-shaven, shorter hair, possible disguise with hats or outdoor gear. While law enforcement pushed forward with the manhunt, Decker's ability to evade capture for nearly a month spoke volumes about the challenge of pursuing a mentally unstable but highly skilled survivalist in the American wilderness. For a larger viewpoint, what do the cases of Travis Decker and Claire Bell have in common? At first glance, they may seem like tragic, isolated incidents, but when laid side by side, a chilling pattern begins to emerge. One that raises urgent questions about mental health, custody oversight, and how our systems are failing to protect children from the very people meant to care for them. In both cases, mental instability played a central role. Decker was formally diagnosed with borderline personality disorder and complex PTSD. He ignored court orders to seek therapy and anger management. Rachel, while not officially diagnosed, displayed numerous red flags, mood swings, threatening messages online, disorientation, and breakdowns caught on video. Yet neither was removed from their caregiving role. In both cases, no legal or medical intervention was made in time. What's worse, warning signs from family members were dismissed or ignored. Decker's family staged an intervention. Rachel's in-laws expressed concern about her erratic behavior and being cut off from Claire. These red flags never triggered deeper investigation, despite coming from close relatives who had seen the early signs. In both tragedies, loved ones saw the storm coming, but no one in power was listening. And then there's the psychological preparation. This wasn't just emotional exhaustion. Both parents gave clear signals of planning or detachment before the incidents. Travis researched moving to Canada days before the murders, possibly to flee. Rachel searched for toddler urns, posted cryptic videos about loss and surrender. These weren't random. They were signs of a disturbed mindset spiraling toward action. Even the geography of the tragedy speaks volumes. Travis led his children deep into the woods, away from help, away from witnesses. Claire was found by the side of a remote highway, over 150 kilometers from where she was last seen. In both stories, the children were removed from public view, a classic tactic of parents planning something irreversible. Afterward, both parents reacted in ways that set off alarm bells. Travis disappeared entirely, leaving behind bodies and blood. Rachel didn't visit Claire in the hospital. She made no public statement. She expressed no relief, no gratitude, no emotion. In both cases, the emotional disconnect was jarring, almost inhuman. These were not the reactions of parents fearing for their children. They were the silences of people who had either detached long ago or were hiding something. Even law enforcement fell short. In Travis's case, Amber Alert was delayed. In Claire's, it was never issued at all. Despite obvious danger, both cases suffered from bureaucratic hesitation. Police waited, systems stalled, and in the meantime, children were lost. When we look at these cases together, it's impossible not to see the systemic failure. Unstable parents, ignored warnings, delayed responses, and kids who paid the price. The heartbreaking truth is this: we're trusting people to be safe simply because they are parents. And that's not enough. In both stories, we see the cost of silence, the price of inaction. These are not isolated events. They may be early signs of a growing trend, one we ignore at our peril. The only suspect in the case of Lilly and Jack Sullivan. Back to the case of Lilly and Jack Sullivan, two young siblings who vanished without a trace in Nova Scotia, is quickly becoming one of the most talked about investigations in Canada. And yet, in the most unsettling way, it's also starting to follow the exact same pattern we've seen in recent tragedies. Among the few voices offering clarity in the murky disappearance of Lilly and Jack Sullivan is Darwood O'Grady, a relative connected to Malaya Brooks Murray, but aligned more closely with Daniel Martel, the children's stepfather. According to Darwood, the truth is stark and deliberate. She put them in a vehicle. She gave them to someone. She is on the run. His statement suggests that Malaya did not simply lose track of her children, but actively arranged for them to be taken away, allegedly handing them off to another person at the side of a road. Darwood insists this wasn't an impulsive act. It was calculated, likely the culmination of mounting tension between Malaya and Daniel. He claims to be 80 to 100% certain of the identity of the person who received the children, and says he is currently tracking that individual. The fallout from his disclosure was immediate and telling. After Darwood shared his suspicions privately with Daniel, Malaya, who reportedly overheard the conversation, panicked. That same night, she fled her mother's home in Wentworth, taking her infant daughter Meadow with her. She's believed to have headed for the Shubenacadie Micmac Reserve, a location that may offer some form of legal protection or connection to her counsel. Darwood also recalls seeing Malaya at the side of the road, appearing nervous and unsettled, possibly just after she had handed the children off. That image, combined with her sudden flight, only deepens suspicion about her involvement. Darwood's position is uniquely complicated. Though he is technically part of Malaya's extended family, he has distanced himself from her actions and aligned with Daniel, sharing sensitive information voluntarily. His account carries weight not just because of what he claims to have seen, but because he occupies a rare middle ground, close enough to know, yet removed enough to speak out. In a case filled with silence and avoidance, Darwood O'Grady may be one of the only people trying to bring the truth to light. However, like every early leaked information, it's important to note that the information provided by Darwood O'Grady has not been fully verified, and both his credibility and the accuracy of his claims remain uncertain at this time. For the known details, long before June 2025, red flags had already begun to emerge. Multiple sources, including members of Daniel Martel's family, stated that Malaya had a history of substance abuse, or at the very least, had previously been involved with controlled substances. Though this information has not been formally confirmed by authorities, it added to growing doubts about her ability to provide a safe, stable environment for her children. These doubts were apparently serious enough to draw the attention of CPS. While the details of any investigation remain sealed or unclear, both Daniel's family and other close contacts have confirmed that CPS was called at least once to assess the living conditions of Lilly and Jack. Whether CPS ever took action remains uncertain. But the fact that they were involved at all is a critical piece of the background. More concerning was Malaya's deliberate distancing of her children from Daniel's side of the family. She reportedly made efforts to cut off contact between Lilly and Jack and their paternal relatives, particularly Daniel and his mother, both of whom had played significant roles in raising the children. The sudden cutoff raised suspicions within the family, especially as Malaya's behavior began to shift more noticeably in the days leading up to the children's disappearance. Daniel's mother, the children's paternal grandmother, said that Malaya began acting very strangely, shortly before the kids went missing, like someone carrying the burden of a secret. Her words suggested that Malaya might have already been planning something and wasn't simply reacting to a moment of distress. There were signs of emotional withdrawal, of detachment. According to both Daniel and his family, Malaya was suffering from what appeared to be postpartum depression after the birth of Meadow. She had grown increasingly anxious and reactive under the pressure of social media speculation. And according to Daniel, she feared being exposed if she remained around him. That emotional detachment was more than just circumstantial. It was becoming a pattern. Members of Cody Sullivan's family, the biological father's side, described Malaya as emotionally detached and disconnected from the children. They claimed she no longer displayed the nurturing instincts or emotional bonds that would typically be expected of a mother to two young children. Whether this was due to untreated depression, psychological stress, or other factors is unclear, but it became increasingly difficult to overlook. Then came the disappearance itself, and with it, Malaya's response, or lack thereof. Unlike other parents in similar situations, she did not make public appeals, did not post desperate messages on social media, did not stand before cameras asking for help. She did not volunteer herself to the public as a grieving mother, nor did she appear to cooperate openly with investigators. RCMP later confirmed that Malaya had undergone a polygraph test, though the results were never publicly disclosed. While this alone doesn't confirm guilt or innocence, the fact that she became a subject of interest in such a formal investigative process speaks volumes. Compounding this were her apparent inconsistencies when asked to clarify her whereabouts and actions during the timeline of the disappearance. Multiple people close to her have stated she was either unwilling or unable to explain her behavior, further complicating the investigation. And perhaps most unsettling of all, as others involved in the case, Daniel, Cody, even Darwood, have come forward, spoken to authorities, taken polygraphs, and made public statements. Malaya has remained silent. She is the one person with the power to clarify what happened, yet she has offered nothing. That silence now echoes louder than ever. As of now, the case of Lilly and Jack Sullivan remains officially categorized as a missing persons investigation, not a criminal abduction or homicide case. Despite the unusual circumstances and the passage of time, the RCMP have not elevated the legal status of the case. No official suspects have been named, although Malaya Brooks Murray, the children's biological mother, was the last known person to be with them, and is currently on the run with her youngest daughter, Meadow. This legal limbo has raised concern among the public, particularly given the gravity of the situation and the potential implications of prolonged inaction. RCMP investigators have carried out a significant number of interviews, 53 in total, with family members, neighbors, and individuals possibly connected to the events. They have also collected surveillance footage from within an 8-kilometer radius around the area where the children were last believed to be. However, no specific details from this footage have been made public, and it remains unclear whether the videos contain any useful leads. While this indicates an ongoing and active investigation, the lack of transparency has left many wondering how close, or far, the authorities are from solving the case. In terms of forensic and behavioral investigation, Malaya Brooks Murray was reportedly subjected to a polygraph test. The results of that test have not been disclosed, and she has not made any public statements or pleas for help since the disappearance. Most notably, she has not participated in any press conferences or search efforts for her missing children. RCMP has not indicated that she was under duress or coercion when she left. In fact, every available piece of information suggests that her actions were self-directed and voluntary. In an effort to generate new leads, the province of Nova Scotia has issued a public reward of 150,000 CAD for any credible tip that leads to the recovery of Lilly and Jack Sullivan. This is one of the largest reward offers in Nova Scotia's history for a missing child case, underscoring the severity and urgency of the situation. Authorities hope this significant financial incentive will encourage anyone with potentially useful information to come forward, especially as the case continues without any meaningful breakthroughs. Overall, the investigation appears to be stalled. There have been no new public developments, no newly identified witnesses, and no major shifts in direction, with both children still missing, and the only adult who may have answers now in hiding. The case stands on unstable ground. Every passing day, without resolution, intensifies the uncertainty, deepens public frustration, and highlights the critical need for more transparency and decisive action. The community waits, still hoping for answers, still searching for the truth. If the information currently available is accurate, if Malaya Brooks Murray truly orchestrated the disappearance of Lilly and Jack Sullivan, then the most disturbing and urgent questions still remain unanswered. What was her goal? Was it an act of desperation, a misguided attempt to protect her children from someone or something? Or was it premeditated, a form of retaliation, control, or detachment? What could possibly compel a mother to remove her children from everyone and vanish without a trace? How did she do it? Did she act alone, or was there someone helping her? If, as Darwood O'Grady claimed, she placed the children into a vehicle and handed them over to another person, then who was that person? And how has this individual avoided detection so far? What role did the destination, possibly a remote reserve or legally complicated area, play in this plan? Then there's the unsettling calmness among those who should be in distress. Why do some people close to Malaya seem so composed? Several individuals interviewed, including those who may know more than they're revealing, have shown a strange, emotional flatness. It's as if the disappearance of two children doesn't register the urgency and fear it should. Could it be denial? Or does it suggest a deeper familiarity with the truth? Where are Lilly and Jack now? Are they safe? Were they taken to a place where no one would ever find them? The longer this silence continues, the more these questions fester. And the worst possibility, are we already too late? Finally, how many people are truly innocent? Because if Malaya didn't act alone, then someone helped her. Someone drove the car. Someone gave her a place to hide. And others may have known or suspected what happened, and chose to say nothing until now. In that silence, in that lack of urgency, lies a complicity we cannot ignore. If this was a mother acting out of fear or mental illness, the system failed her. But if it was more deliberate, calculated even, then every passive witness and withheld truth becomes a part of the crime. And that's the question we must now face. Not just who did it, but who let it happen. In the wake of these haunting cases, the disappearance of Lilly and Jack Sullivan, the baffling ordeal of Claire Bell, and the devastating triple homicide committed by Travis Decker, one lesson becomes painfully clear. Children are most vulnerable, not in the hands of strangers, but in the silence of the people closest to them. Each case reveals a disturbing pattern, one that should shake the foundation of how we view family, mental health, and institutional responsibility. Let's begin with what should be obvious but somehow isn't. Being a biological parent does not guarantee safety for a child. Travis Decker was the father of Peyton, Evelyn, and Olivia. Rachel Todd was the mother of Claire Bell. Malaya Brooks Murray is the mother of Lilly and Jack. In all three cases, the parents were the last known individuals to be with their children before those children either vanished or died. And yet, despite red flags, emotional instability, previous CPS involvement, mental health warnings, and known behavioral issues, no meaningful intervention occurred until it was too late. In Travis Decker's case, he was a trained soldier, diagnosed with borderline personality disorder and complex PTSD. He was living off-grid, in a vehicle, with multiple signs of emotional detachment and disregard for court orders. His family raised the alarm. His ex-wife warned the courts. But the system gave him access to his children because, legally, he hadn't crossed the line yet. In Claire Bell's case, Rachel Todd had no formal diagnosis, but her digital footprint was flooded with concerning content, depressive rants, videos about grief, possible references to child loss. She isolated Claire from extended family. She appeared increasingly detached. but no one intervened. There were no restrictions on where she could take her daughter. Then there's Malaya. By all accounts, she had distanced herself from family, showed emotional withdrawal, had a potential history with substance use, and may have been under stress from a custody battle. Yet, even as tensions escalated, she was still the default guardian, without surveillance, support, or restriction. When the children went missing, there was no Amber Alert. And now, she too is missing. What do these stories have in common? They are not about isolated evil. They are about predictable breakdowns. Not one of these cases involves a stranger ambush, a random kidnapping, or an external predator. They are about quiet collapses within families. Collapses that were visible long before tragedy struck, but no one had the power, will, or legal grounds to act in time. And here lies the biggest lesson: mental health is not a private matter when children are at stake. We must stop treating it as such. A parent experiencing clear psychological distress, posting erratic behavior online, or being flagged by those closest to the child, should not be allowed to disappear into the gray areas of legal ambiguity. There must be thresholds, preemptive interventions, that allow systems to step in before children become statistics. We also need to rethink how we define risk. These cases show that just because there's no bruising, no prior criminal record, and no recorded domestic violence doesn't mean a child is safe. Risk isn't always loud. Sometimes, it's subtle, it's withdrawal, it's obsession, it's detachment. And if we wait for a violent outburst to act, we're waiting too long. Equally troubling is the lack of urgency when children go missing under suspicious, but legally ambiguous circumstances. The failure to trigger Amber Alerts, the slow response to behavioral red flags, the tendency to treat domestic custody disputes as personal issues, instead of potential precursors to larger tragedies. This caution, this procedural inertia, has cost lives. Lastly, we must ask harder questions of everyone involved, not just the parents. Who else saw the signs and said nothing? Who shrugged off the warnings? Who prioritized legal protocol over moral obligation? In each case, there were people who knew something wasn't right. And in each case, it wasn't enough. These stories should not just make us sad. They should make us angry. Angry at the silence. Angry at the gaps. Angry that in a society filled with technology, institutions, professionals, and extended family members, children can still disappear without a trace from inside their own homes. The real tragedy is not that we didn't know. It's that we knew just enough to fear the worst, and not enough was done to prevent it. If there's any justice left to serve, let it begin here, with remembering, with questioning, and with doing better for the next child who shows up in a system that too often arrives late.